Good morning. I wanted to take a minute and share the story of what Dave and I have been through over the last 2 years plus. And the reason I wanted to share this, and it was important to both Dave and I, is because um, after 2 years of a pretty long season of waiting, we had a absolutely glorious end to our story. And so the Bible teaches us to remember his goodness, remember his faithfulness. Psalm 105:5 says, remember the wondrous works he has done. And so this is us remembering. On July 8th of this year, after 2 years, 1 month, and 22 days, we closed on our house in Woodland on my mom's birthday, interestingly enough. But here's the story of how we got there. And many of you have walked this journey with us for the last 2 years, but we felt it was important to share the details, and we're actually very eager to share the details with you. When we first listed our house in May of 2024, we prayed for somebody who would love our home. We built the home, we loved it, we put a lot of extra details into it, and we wanted somebody who would love it and appreciate all those details, but who would also be a good fit for our neighborhood. And ultimately, we wanted somebody who would love the Lord and continue to use the house for his glory. We dedicated the house to him when we built it, and we saw him use our home time and time again, and we wanted the same thing for for the new owners of our home. And so that was our prayer for the last 2 years. I do have notes I'm referring to, by the way. It's a long story, and a lot of beautiful details, and I didn't want to miss it. So that began a season of waiting for us, a 2 year season. And in that 2 years, we had a lot of growth, a lot of trying moments, lament. We had more than 20 open houses. We had 3 offers fall through, and more false starts than we probably either care to remember anymore. It was quite a journey. But along the way, God gave us so many nuggets of gold. And there was a growth, and there were things that we experienced that I don't think we could have ever received from the Lord had we not been in this season. And so one of the things God gave us when we moved over here in November of 2024, so we listed the house in May of 2024, moved over in November of 2024, thinking our house would sell anytime. We didn't think we would be in our cabin that we have here in Eagle Crest. We didn't think we'd be in there very long. We thought, well, the house will sell pretty soon. But it didn't. And so in this time, the Lord brought us to a wonderful church community in Joy Church. We got plugged in and connected really quick, which is, I think, fairly unusual. We have made some wonderful friends. We were in a life group that we continue to be in, just wonderful people that we've prayed with and shared life with, and they've cried with us and lamented with us and praised with us. And so he gave us that, and then he gave us a beautiful volunteer community in Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch. They're a community that we consider our second family. We have grown very close to the staff at Crystal Peaks. We adore them, and the Lord has really knit our hearts together. So he gave us 2 of these wonderful just places of community and church family, which has just been such a blessing. He also removed the veil on our faith. I think we would have told you that our faith was strong before this season. But for sure, our faith grew, and the Lord removed the veil on a lot of things for us, and we pressed in, and there was great growth. And anyone who loves Jesus would say they wouldn't change that for anything. And as most of us know, that growth comes in the midst of trial. And so we also experienced that, which is a gift, to be perfectly honest with you, and something we wouldn't have traded. But he also taught us about the seen and the unseen. And I have shared this story before, but in July of 2025, I really hit the wall, and I was struggling. I was doing a Bible study called Discerning the Voice of God from Priscilla Shirer. And I was just really struggling hearing the Lord's voice. And I wrote down a couple things in my Bible study because I just was feeling like, are we supposed to be here? Are we sure we're supposed to be in Central Oregon? Maybe we moved too quick. Maybe this isn't where he wants us. And so I wrote down all of these reasons, the confirmation of our planting in Central Oregon and why it was good. And I wrote Joy Church and that we got connected quickly, and Crystal Peaks Youth Ranch was a deep part of our lives and how he directed us there. And we'd made a bunch of new Christian friends, and we'd had really what I felt was explosive growth in our walk with the Lord, and just wonderful things like that. But then I made a list of the things for maybe why we were supposed to stay in Woodland. Maybe we made the wrong choice. Maybe we moved too soon. And so I wrote things like the house isn't selling, and we're having issues with some of the things from a maintenance standpoint. Nothing major, but just stuff that we had to keep going back and forth for pretty regularly. Just really no showings and no interest in our house, which was crazy because here we had a house with a pool and it's July, and just like zero interest in our home. Open house after open house after open house, no showings. Very rarely did people even come to the open houses. So I just was really struggling in that. And so I wrote these two things down, and I was crying and just asking the Lord, why can't I hear from you? Can you just show me something? Would you just give me something to show that you're hearing me? And because I think sometimes when we go through these seasons, we feel like the Lord doesn't hear us. And deep down in our knower of knowers, of course, we know he does. But sometimes we just get stuck and we just are asking for a sign, just something. And so my Bible happened to be open to 2 Corinthians, and I looked down in my Bible, and it was not open to the passage I'm about to share with you, but it was open to 2 Corinthians because of the study I had been in. And I looked down, and in the right-hand corner of the right page was 2 Corinthians 4:16. Therefore we do not lose heart, even though our outward man is perishing, yet the inward man is being renewed day by day. For our affliction, which is but for a moment, is working for us a far more exceeding and external weight of glory, while we do not look at the things which are seen, but the things which are unseen. And it was like this huge weight was lifted off my shoulders, and I just had this immediate joy and gratitude because these lists that I had just made in my Bible study moments before, the Lord gave me the scripture, and all of the things which were the confirmation of our planting in Central Oregon were the things that 2 Corinthians 4:16 talks about, which are the unseen. Those are called the eternal. And that's all kingdom work. And so all of the things that had been happening, he was showing me that I have you doing my kingdom work right now. And I don't want you distracted with material things like a house or moving or anything like that. In this season, I need you to do my kingdom work. And so that's the eternal, which is the unseen. And then this other list of why the house isn't selling and all these piddly little things, he said through the scripture, that's the temporary. That's the seen, that's the obvious, that's the material, but that's not where his kingdom work is done. And so he showed me so clearly that he had us working in his kingdom, which is all the unseen. And so it was such a, it was so convicting and joyful at the same time, because it was like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. Thank you, Jesus. And literally the next Sunday at church, we actually had guest worship team, which is really unusual at our church. And the guest worship team was singing, and at one point they stopped and they quoted the scripture, 2 Corinthians 4:16. And so that was another confirmation the Lord had given me. So that happened in July of last year. So this is in the middle of, that's little over a year into our house being for sale. But that was such a precious thing. And at that time, I knew for sure we were supposed to be here. We were doing his kingdom work. And what that meant was that we had to be willing to be patient and just wait for his perfect timing. And so it changed my mind and my attitude quite a bit. And so these are some of the things that had happened in this season of waiting and some heartbreak and tough times. But then, just as the Bible talks about, God acted suddenly. And so I want to make a quick reference to Top Gun, which some of you are going to laugh because you know how much I love the Maverick movie. And in the Maverick movie, for those of you who have seen it, you know that they talk about when Tom Cruise, when Maverick does this fly through this area, and there's 3 miracles that they have to hit in order for this mission to be accomplished. And so as they're going through, one of the guys says, that's miracle number 1, that's miracle number 2. So I'm going to reference that in here because as these things started to unfold, once God started to act with the sale of our house in this next process, Dave and I just kept laughing to ourselves. That's miracle number 1. So I'm going to share that with you. So on Thursday, May 28th, the new clock began, and we had a first showing from a couple. Got feedback that it was really a good showing. They were very positive, really loved the house. Within a couple days, we got notification of a second showing, which was going to be on Wednesday, June 3rd, and we were told that they were going to make an offer tomorrow. And so the next day, we were all excited, and it was an interesting time because we actually had felt really good about it and we were excited, but we've been through this before. And so it gets to be about 6 o'clock on that Thursday and we still hadn't heard anything. And to be honest with you, I kind of tanked. I think I went to bed around 7:30 that night. I was kind of mentally undone. I had just cried with Dave and just said, I just don't understand why we have to keep going through this. And I had actually read 2 devotions that morning, and one of them said, yes, I will engineer circumstances on your behalf. And the other one said, today, how might you display your faith in his ability to act on your behalf? And you know, you can't make this stuff up, guys. You know it. 2 separate devotions, and they both were talking about God acting on our behalf. And so I kept praying about that and forcing myself to kind of push through that pain and stand on that promise. And I thought, Lord, is this delay because you're working on our behalf? You're doing something in this? And it really was, when I went to bed, it really was the prayer of just help me to trust you, Lord, help my unbelief. And I wrote in my journal that day, he will act on my behalf. And so I go to bed that night, a little heartbroken, but still pushing through and trying to trust. And the next morning, we still hadn't heard anything. And we talked to our realtor. And I basically told her, you know, after 2 years, you can't send us a text and say we're going to get an offer. At this point, we've been on an emotional roller coaster. And basically just don't text us unless we get an offer. And she felt really bad. She said she was so sure that they were going to put an offer in, and based on her conversation with the other realtor. And so anyway, Dave and I decided to go hiking that day. We just needed a mental break and we needed to get away. And so we went on this absolutely wonderful hike. And all throughout the day, I kept reminding myself, he's working on your behalf. He's working on your behalf. He's doing something. And we were out of service where we were hiking. And so we get back into service, and at 3:40 p.m. we get a text from Amy, and it says, contingent offer in your inbox. It's a full price, but they have a home to sell. And so we were told by their realtor that homes in their area were selling within a couple days. And so we felt really good about taking the offer, and they were willing to price their house aggressively to sell it. And something felt different about this offer. And so even though it was contingent, and gosh, and here we were having had a house that hadn't sold in 2 years, it was kind of interesting that we were willing to take an offer. But we felt really good about it, and we felt like the Lord was moving. And so on Saturday, June 6th, we signed the offer, and the buyers, they literally had, 5 days to list their home. So they had to have their home listed by June 11th. So we're waiting those 5 days, and June 11th comes, that's a Thursday, and I keep watching on Zillow to see if their house had listed, and 2:30 and absolutely nothing. And I'm thinking, okay, here we go. And Lord, help me to trust. I mean, here I am again. And about 3 o'clock, I see their listing go live. And as I look back, I feel like that's the moment when God really just snapped his fingers and the process just ran, because within 3 hours of them listing their home, our buyers had 2 full price offers, one of which was cash. And that was the one they accepted. That's miracle number 1. So Friday, June 12th, we were officially pending and under contract on our house. And so our realtor, Amy, had called us first thing in the morning to see if we could actually close early, because our buyers, of course, had a cash offer and they were planning on closing early. And so we created this timeline, and because our stuff was pretty much out of the Washington house, we agreed to do that. And so we had set a closing date for July 10th. And so now we needed to find a house in Redmond. And in the 2 years our house had been on the market, we probably looked at, I'm not kidding when I say 50 houses, the majority of which were in Eagle Crest, where our cabin was. And so what's interesting, is at this point, literally every house we had looked at as a consideration had gone pending. So I'm scanning through the listings on Zillow, and all of the ones that we had looked at, pending, except one. And there was one that we had looked at before, and that one house was contingent. So Dave and I, so I'm going to backtrack here. Dave and I first saw this house in the summer of 2024, and I can still remember the first time we drove up to the house, and I thought, oh my gosh, this house is beautiful. The grounds are beautiful, just a gorgeous home. And we walked in, and I loved it. I literally fell in love with it immediately. But at that time, of course, in the summer of 2024, we didn't have an offer on a house yet. And so we were just looking, and of course, eventually the house sold. And then last September, 9 months ago, it went for sale again. And I can remember seeing it come up on Zillow and saying to Dave, you are not going to believe this. That house that we loved is back on the market. And so we set up a showing just to go see, is it still in the running? Is it still something that we're interested in? And should we get an offer on our house, then we'll know. So we went and toured it, and I had the exact same feeling. We pulled into the driveway, and I absolutely loved it. We walked into the house, and I loved it. I just loved this house. And so there were only 2 houses in the last 2 years, 50 plus homes, that I think I actually had like a literal visceral emotional response when I walked in. And one was not an Eagle Crest, and we had always felt like we were going to be an Eagle Crest long term. And so one was not an Eagle Crest, and one was. And this house that had come back on was the house. And so again, I walked in, and for the second time, just had that same very emotional response. It felt good. I just love this home. So we put that beloved house back on our list. That's in September of last year. Meanwhile, shortly after that house went back on the market, we received 2 offers, both of which fell through. And each time we got those offers, I remember thinking, maybe God was saving that house for us in Eagle Crest, and these offers are going to come through. And no, both offers fell through. And I remember thinking, well, then again, maybe not. And so we waited and waited and waited some more. Psalm 40, verse 1 in the Passion Translation talks about the waiting. And so in February of this year, that same house had an open house, and we went, and I fell in love with it again for the 3rd time. And it was crazy. They still had no offers, no activity. And then again, months and no activity on our house, and no activity on theirs. And then on May 9th, another open house. And so we went again, and this is the 4th time. And the realtor was actually standing at the front door. And when we walked up, she literally gave us a hug. She knew how much we loved this home, and she was all excited. And she said, did your house finally sell? And I remember Dave said to her, Rachel, if our house had sold, we would have an offer on this house right now. And so it didn't. Our house, of course, hadn't sold at that time. And but we walked through, and she knew how much we loved it. And so we were walking through, and there were several other couples in here, one of which was just very, you could just tell they were very interested in it. And I remember thinking to myself, myself they're going to put an offer on this house. And so we went home, and a couple days later I look on Zillow and the house is contingent. And so I it was a little bit heavy for me again, and because so many times I remember saying to Dave, maybe God's holding this house for us, maybe he's saving it for us. And but here it was contingent, and I thought, oh, okay, I was wrong, maybe not. And so fast forward now to June 12th. So we had received this offer. We were officially pending, but now we needed a house in Redmond. And literally the only house left was this house that we had looked at and fallen in love with. But it was contingent. So we called our realtor over here and we said, Carol, the only house left is, and she said, I know. And she knew, because she knew we loved this house. And she knew we'd seen it several times with her. And I said, but it's contingent. And she says, oh no, that doesn't mean anything. I'm calling the realtor right now. So she called the realtor, and she called us back just a few minutes later. And she said, you're not going to believe this. And already in my heart, I knew. And I'm thinking, yeah, I am. And she said, they've been contingent and their buyers have had zero activity on their home. So they want you to put an offer in. And I remember just sitting there and thinking to myself, you did save the house for us. After 2 years, you saved the house for us. So here's the thing with a contingent, for those of you that don't know, when a buyer or when a seller puts their house on the market, they can take a contingent offer, which means the buyer has to sell their house. And they typically have 30 days to do it. And so our buyer was approaching the buyer of the house we were interested in was approaching their 30 days. And so the sellers wanted us to put an offer in. And so, and so when Carol called us to say they had no activity, that's miracle number 2. The house needed some remodeling. And so here we are in the middle of June, very busy for contractors. But we called a contractor from our church who was highly recommended. And we knew him, and we wanted to see what his schedule would look like in the event that we chose to move forward with this house, because it needed some remodeling, needed some work. And we were kind of trying to see, if we decide to take this on, can we get somebody in here to start working on this quickly? Are we 6 months out? What does this look like? And so we contacted him. He admitted he was pretty busy, but he thought he could get us in soon. That's miracle number 3. So Saturday, what's funny is because it took us so long for us to sell our house, I think we almost didn't know that it was okay to put an offer in. So we were kind of, I think, struggling a little bit with the decision, and is this the right timing, and are we supposed to do this, and are we moving ahead of God's timing, or is this his perfect will? And I mean, gosh, it was like we didn't even know. But then I remember writing in my journal, I said, I believe the time is now, and I believe God is orchestrating the pieces. No activity on the Redmond buyer's house, our contractor's availability, providing a cash buyer for our buyer to move our timeline quickly, giving us a closing date inside of 30 days. So I had to write all that down, and now is when we would normally need to find a house. Now that we're pending now, Lord. And so I'm thinking, okay, yes, it's okay, we can do this. So Dave and I put an offer in that night, and by Tuesday, the other contingent buyer had terminated their contract, and we were officially pending on this house that we had fallen in love with 2 years ago. And God had held that house for us for 9 months, even tying it up with a contingent offer, I believe, so that nobody else would look at it. That was miracle number 4. And so the inspection on our house was in process, and that went well with only minor issues that were quickly fixed. That's miracle number 5. And then another cool thing is we had 3 existing storage units in Redmond. We had moved a bunch of our stuff already over from the Woodland house into the storage units. But we had some last items in the house left for staging, and those needed to be moved over. So now we needed 2 storage units, and we were hoping that they were climate controlled because it was furniture items. And so I called the place where our storage unit was and talked to the gal there, and I said, do you by any chance have two 10 by 10 climate controlled units? Now, again, we're in the middle of June, busy moving season. And the gal said, well, you won't believe this. I just had two units come open. Had you called me yesterday, I would have told you no, but I just had somebody contact me this morning and I have two units open for you now. So that was miracle number 6. So then we called our contractor back. So now we put an offer in, got it accepted. We called the contractor back and said, is there any chance you can meet us on Saturday? Again, busy weekend, the whole 9 yards. But it was literally the only day in the next 10 days that we could meet him because Dave was out of town. Oh, did I mention? Dave was out of town on his annual Brothers golf trip when all of this was happening. So even when we signed our offer, we didn't even get to clink glasses and say cheers together because he was with his brother. But anyway, so Dave wasn't going to be back till Friday night. We needed to meet with this contractor on Saturday, hopefully, because then we had to drive over to Washington to start packing to move back over here. So the contractor said he was available. That's miracle number 7. So I called a company to come to our house, also in Woodland. We needed to unhook some components. And a few months earlier, I had called just to find out, what kind of lead time do you need? And they said, oh, we're probably 3 weeks out. And I'm thinking, well, 3 weeks is like, that would be the day we got an offer. I'd have to call, but, regardless. Well, because our timeline had pushed up and our realtor had asked us to, if we could move out a little earlier than the closing date, because then the new buyers wanted to be able to move in early because they were closing early, and so we had this whole trickle effect. And so I called this company and I said, we only have 1 day we can make this work. Is there any chance you would have somebody available? And it was a week out, and the gentleman said, actually, we happen to have a morning appointment first thing in the morning if you can make that work, which of course we could. And that, my friends, was miracle number 8. You can't make this stuff up. You can try all you want to say, oh, that's coincidence and this and that, and try to add it up. But the honest truth is there are no coincidences, no coincidences in the kingdom of heaven. And every single step when God enacts his plan is appointed. And the Bible says in Matthew 16:18, not even the gates of hell will prevail against it. And so when God puts his plan in place, he rolls. And so we were seeing all of the beauty of everything just lining up, everything we were asking for, praying for, everything that needed to be done was coming through easily. And so we just had the real blessing of knowing that, and we've always known this, we've always said this, but here we are experiencing no coincidence, just Jesus. And so June 27th comes, we met with our contractor, he spent a few hours with us, and we had another blessing. He told us he would be able to start working on our house right away. And after 2 years of waiting for our Woodland house to sell and going through holidays, that was really hard for me because the last 2 years we had actually had to rent a house for our kids and grandkids to stay in. And so we had always loved having our family with us at Christmas, but we weren't able to do that the last 2 years. And that was really, really hard for me. And so when we realized that he would be able to start our project quickly and we would have our house by Christmas, it was pretty special. And so that was miracle number 9. Meanwhile, we had an inspection on our Redmond house, and again, only minor issues. And what was amazing is the house in Redmond is almost 30 years old, and the inspector told us this was the cleanest house that he had ever inspected that was that age, and he was absolutely blown away by how great a shape it was in. And even our realtor had said she just couldn't believe it. She said she was a little nervous because anytime you have a house that's 30 years old, there's going to be issues and things, and she was a little nervous about that for us. But the inspector came back and it was basically just totally clean, very minor things. And so the gift of that was miracle number 10. So, are you tired of the miracles yet? Because the story isn't over. So, between June 27th and July 8th, when we closed, which July 8th, so now that's 2 days earlier than the July 10th closing that we were originally given, um, the the Lord continued to orchestrate and show us his goodness. Our move from Washington to Oregon was smooth, it was quick, came in about half the price that we were originally quoted. We'll take it. Miracle number 11. Our buyers closed on their house that they had for sale on July 2nd, 3 weeks after they had listed it with their cash buyer. God did that. That's miracle number 12. We were able to do a simultaneous closing on our house here in Redmond and also the house in Washington that we were selling, which that can be quite a feat to get all of the people involved in the process to be able to make a simultaneous closing work is kind of a thing. It's not super common, but God did that too. And that was miracle number 13. And so if that weren't enough, I think the icing on the cake for us was we were able to meet the buyers who bought our house in Washington. Paul and Amy had asked for a comprehensive walkthrough where we have a lot of just kind of extras in the house that we built and just things that would be helpful for a new owner. And so we agreed to meet with them, and we hit it off with them. They were so kind, so friendly. In fact, we still text with them regularly. Dave and Paul text frequently. They've talked on the phone several times. They're just delightful people. And so right off the bat, that was an answer to our prayer, that they would be a couple who would just be a great fit for our neighborhood. We prayed that the people who bought our house would love our house, and Paul and Amy were just going on and on about our house. Amy had told us that when they first walked in, she said she was 3 steps in the door and looked at her husband and said, "Where do we sign?" So they loved it. After they had walked through the house, when they were leaving, she told us that she had said to her husband, if we don't get this house, because there was actually another showing that afternoon, she said, if for some reason we don't get this house, we need to get the plan because I want to build this exact same house. And so they just had told us how much they loved the home, how every little detail, it was like they noticed it. They could see all the details that we put in. And Amy even said at one point, it's like we felt like that you built this house for us. And so that was, again, just such a beautiful answer to prayer, because when you build a home and you live in it for as long as we did, and you sell it, you just want somebody who really loves it like you did and who will care for it. And we know that God gave us that couple in Paul and Amy. So we got to meet them, but then it got better because we got to hear the story of how they found our house. They were not even on the market with their home. So they have a son who lives in Seattle and a daughter who lived in Toronto. And I think sounds like they lived in Camas, Washington, by the way. And so they had talked about sometime over the next couple years moving north, just wanting to get out of Camas and move a little farther north, and maybe getting a little closer to their son, and just, easier travel back and forth. And so this is just something they were toying with in the back of their mind. And Paul had the Zillow app on his phone and would just, get updates and alerts occasionally. So Paul and Amy and their son were in New York eating at their favorite pizza restaurant under the Brooklyn Bridge. And Paul pulls out his phone and opens up Zillow, or I don't know if he got an email, I can't remember, and our house pops up. And I guess as the story goes, he starts looking at it and he goes, whoa, this house, it just resonated with him. And he says, Amy, you got to see this house. So he hands Amy the phone, and Amy looks at it and she goes, whoa, this is beautiful. We should look at this. And they hand the phone to their son, and he's like, oh my gosh, you guys need to see this house. And so just resonates with all of them. And so there's a little, button on Zillow that says, schedule with the realtor. And so I guess Paul said, he's holding the phone up to Amy and their son and says, do I push the button? And Amy and her son look at each other and they said yes. And he goes, I'm pushing it. So they push the button, they schedule the appointment. And so they come to the house and of course fall in love with it. And what's so cool, after 2 years, God brought us a buyer who wasn't even in the market. He put this house in front of them, moved them to fall in love with this house, and it was so appealing that they were willing to list their house quickly. That hadn't even had any thought of doing that, going on the market this summer. I mean, it's a whole thing when you're moving out of a house. You usually have some prep time and thoughts of what it's going to take to do that. And so they hadn't even gone through that process, and yet God put this house in front of them and they fell in love. So they came back and saw our house, put an offer in, and listed their house 5 days later. And what's so cool about this is that I just was reminded that God is the giver of perfect gifts. James 1:17 says every good and perfect gift is from above. And so he gave our buyers a perfect gift for them because they fell in love with our home. And he gave us the gift of hearing their story and getting to experience that, because how often do you meet the buyer of your house? I mean, this is not common. And to be able to spend time and hear their story, it was such a blessing. It was like the Lord just took this whole package and tied it up with a bow, and just, it was like he wanted us to know, remember those things that you were praying for even 2 years ago? I just wanted you to know I did that. And we might never have known that, but because we got to meet Paul and Amy, we knew that he did it. And so God did that too. And that was miracle number 14. I think the fact that they weren't even looking for a home or in the market, and that God put our house in front of them and they fell in love with it, really speaks to God's faithfulness and the beauty of this whole journey. And then the fact that he held a house that we had fallen in love with 2 years prior. Not the whole time. He sold it in the interim, but what's cool is the people who bought it 2 years ago, after we had first fallen in love with it, put a fair amount of money into the house and a new roof, and upgraded some things that were really beneficial and that we loved and we were able to appreciate. So he actually brought somebody else in and used their money to make the house better for us, because that's what God does. And so but then he held this house for us and he gave it to us after the second buyers. And so the Lord, he can prove himself faithful in good seasons. Of course he can, and we see it all the time. But we don't receive it the same way. Where we truly see his faithfulness is when we go through seasons of trial. And I've been telling people all my life that I trust his plan. I've been walking with him my whole life. But I can tell you this, you find out real quick whether you really trust his plan or not when you're held to the flame, and when he puts you in a waiting season of 2 years. And I remember even a time I was reading in the book of Job, and I had a moment where I thought, did Satan go to God about us like he did with Job and say, well, sure, they love you. You've given them everything. They have a wonderful house and friends and everything's good. They have health, and of course they love you, and of course they're going to follow you. But what happens when you don't give them all of those things? And I thought, I wonder if he went and said, let me test Dave and Natalia. Let me see if they still love you if you don't give them the blessing, and if you keep blessing from them for a period of time. And it was almost like he was allowed to keep the house from selling, and yet God blessed everything else outside of that house. This is the seen and the unseen. He was blessing everything in his kingdom work. He was blessing everything in the unseen, the relationships and the ministry and all of those things. And so we were able to press in with him and grow, and then ultimately he gave us the desires of our heart, and he gave us this house that we fell in love with 4 times before we finally bought it. And so we have a new house in Redmond and we're in the middle of a remodel, and we're hoping to move in October, and we will get to host our family here. I remember walking through this house on the 4th time, and when I was thinking to myself, I love this house. I love this house. And as I look back, I had no idea what God was doing at that time. I had no idea, but he was moving and he was working even in that time. And I think maybe somebody who's watching this needs to hear that. Maybe you're in a season of trial, a season of waiting. You feel like you're not being heard. You don't understand. You've prayed the prayer, how long, oh Lord, how long? But I can tell you, he is working on your behalf. He is working behind the scenes, and he is putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. And when you finally get to the end, he's going to show you the masterpiece of the puzzle that he'd been working on. You just need to keep believing and just keep pressing in and just keep staying close. Stay close to him. And so I pray that this story brings you encouragement and hope. And I'm so grateful. Dave and I are so grateful for the family and friends that walked this journey with us and held our arms up when we couldn't hold our arms up, and prayed with us in broken and tender moments when we were struggling. But God is faithful, and he has given us the desire of our hearts, and given us more, immeasurably more than we could have asked or imagined in this house. And so he does that. And if you're in the middle of it, you hold on. He did it for us, and he's going to do it for you too.